What is the most scared you've ever been? Story 1 by the user, Rain the Pain. I used to be homeless when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. We lived in a burnt-down shack in the middle of the woods. Me, my mom, brother, and sister. We were all 1 year apart. I remember waking up on multiple occasions from my sister screaming, "Mommy," out into the pitch-black forest. I remember everything being so pitch-black. Couldn't see anything. Then I would see a flashlight coming up the hill, and it would be my mom. That's when I would feel relief. Relief that my mom was back, but I'm assuming relief that I was going to survive and not starve to death in the middle of the mountains. Story 2 by the user, Freedom Fighter. It was around 7 p.m. My brother and I were young kids, maybe 10. My dad was out of town, and my mom was at work. The weather was really bad. It had been storming all day. We were keeping local news on the TV because there was a tornado watch. It was upgraded to a tornado warning. Shortly after that, we lost power. While we were finding the flashlights, we started hearing sirens. Knowing proper protocol, we decided to rush to the basement, flip the couch, and get under it. But before we went down, I took one last look outside. I saw a massive column of air coming towards us. Just this sheer force of nature, and it was heading this way. Thankfully, it didn't reach us. Our area was fine. I've been in some pretty dicey situations, but nothing will come close to the fear I felt when I saw that tornado. Story 3 by the user, Ed_the_bloody. Saving my house cat from a mountain lion. I had a sidearm, but when I called for the cat, she meowed and I directed the beam of light to the sound only to see 4 eyes staring back at me. Fuck me. This was a really bad idea. Story 4 by the user, Tekrith. I have 2 that are related to each other. At 13, my family and I were in a really bad car accident. We thought I'd broke my neck and that my mom was dying, or I thought she was anyway. The anesthetist grabbed the wrong thing and quickly injected the paralyzer. She went into a seizure. I don't fully understand how, and they had no idea what happened. Mom ended up in the ICU. 7 hours later, she walked out of the ICU, something that still surprises doctors. She said she was awake and could hear everything while the surgical staff panicked. The anesthetist grabbed the wrong thing and quickly injected the paralyzer. She went into a seizure. I don't fully understand how, and they had no idea what happened. Mom ended up in the ICU. 7 hours later, she walked out of the ICU, something that still surprises doctors. She said she was awake and could hear everything while the surgical staff panicked. Story 5 by the user, 9___ like the number. I'm on medication for mental health issues. When this happened, I'd been on the same medication for some years and found it had always given me heart palpitations and a super increased heart rate for between half an hour and 2 hours after taking it. I googled and it turns out this was a very common side effect for this particular medication. After being told to increase the dosage by 100 milligrams, not in small increments, just a straight jump from 200 milligrams to 300 milligrams, I obviously found the increased heart rate after I'd taken it much worse. It got so bad that I was rushed to A&E twice in the middle of the night for potential heart attacks. But it wasn't being rushed to A&E that was scary. What was absolutely terrifying was sitting physically feeling my heart pounding away in my chest at such speed and with such force that I was terrified that each thumping beat would be its last. Sitting there in the middle of the night with my parents on the phone to the ambulance people, absolutely petrified that with that last beat there would be this sudden stillness in my chest, thinking of the things I'd never get to say to my siblings, knowing there isn't a single thing I could do to change what was happening. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Story 6 by the user, bananas_r_sick24. Was swimming in a river with 3 of my cousins. Lightning storm hit. 2 of these cousins are unable to swim, with the youngest one being too short to cross the river by himself without being swept away. I grabbed the youngest one and swam/waded to the nearest land, an island in the middle of the river, and grabbed my dog out of the water. A couple seconds after all of us and both dogs got onto the land, a lightning bolt struck so close that everything was temporarily blindingly bright, and the sound caused our ears to ring for a good bit afterwards. We had to wait that storm out for a bit, and stupidly decided to cross the river before the storm was over. Another lightning bolt struck really close whilst we were crossing and caused my smallest cousin to trip and cut his face on one of the rocks. Story 7 by the user, Shortegia saying. Back in May, my mom asked me to stay home from church on a Sunday to ice my brother's birthday cake since his party was an hour after church. I was the only one home and saw everyone leave, so it was just the dog, the cat, and me all alone. Everything was going good until I heard someone run up the stairs at full speed. The kitchen is right beside the stairs that lead to the basement, and I bolted right out the front door. Came back in. Everything was fine for 5 minutes or so until I heard something trying to imitate a cat's meow to lure my cat down to the basement. Scared the shit out of me since I was the only one there, and not once did anyone enter the house. The back door leads right downstairs and the front door cuts through the open living room we have and right to the kitchen. Story 8 by the user, Luniol. My apartment got flooded when a pipe burst a few apartments above mine. I stayed in the hotel for a few weeks while my apartment dried out with all the baseboards pulled out, the carpet ripped up and big holes cut in the walls to make sure it all dried without mold. When the damage was fixed and I was able to come back home, it was about 10 days till I started to get bug bites on my legs and stomach while I slept. I was sure that I'd brought some bed bugs home from the hotel, so I put out some glue traps and asked the apartment manager to have pest control check my place. A week later, pest control comes by and says, "You don't have bed bugs, you have spiders," and showed me the full glue traps. I'm terrified of spiders. I guess the flood waters drove them out of the walls, and there were so many that they were all over my bed while I slept. I had to wait 2 weeks for pest control to come by again and spray my place. In the meantime, I slept on my recliner and showered at the local rec center since the bathtub had a lot in it every day. It was so scary, having to work from home in my bedroom, knowing there were spiders all around me but having no choice because my office was set up in there, and the company office building was closed due to a COVID surge. This happened in July. They've sprayed a few times since then and I think everything's fine, but I've still got a lot of lingering anxiety. Story 9 by the user, Heike Stupid. When I was about 9 to 10, my parents had already started leaving me home alone. Lucky me, right? Well, one night it was pouring rain and the power had went out for a little bit. They texted me on my phone. It had belonged to my grandma before she died, so instead of selling it they gave it to me in case of emergency. I think it was an Android, saying there was a crash and they'd take a little bit getting home. Well, I was scared of the dark and lighting, so things already weren't great before I had heard knocking on the door. I made sure it was locked and hid in my closet crying. We were living in a kinda rural area, so I had no neighbors. The knocking got louder and well, it turned out my sister had forgot her key and was coming to check up on me. I was crying like a little baby since I had already gotten into my true crime phase and still in years later, so I genuinely thought some murder was standing outside. Funny now but terrifying as shit at the time. Story 10 by the user, Mr. Military. I was 12 and spent a weekend over at my grandparents' place. In the middle of the night when I was asleep, I was woken up by a knock on the room's door. I looked at the time and saw it's around 4 a.m. I knew my grandparents must have been asleep still, so I almost shit my pants. When I gave no answer, the door opened anyways and I saw 2 police officers walk in. At first I calmed down. But then I thought, have I done anything wrong? Which spiked my fear even more than before they came in. They didn't tell anything aside. Get up, get ready, we're taking you to your mom. And that's all they said. So I did just that. Got up, got dressed, and got into their car. They took me to my aunt's place, which confused me. And when I realized we're not driving the way to my home, I thought I was kidnapped by fake cops. I remember almost blacking out from fear. But when they stopped and parked at my aunt's place, my fear sunk again, since I know where we are, and when I walk in I see my mom, aunt, and me other grandma standing next to each other in the living room. Once again my fear spiked because I thought I had FD up badly. But then my mom approached me and told me that my father had took his own life. All I remember from that moment is I was screaming at the top of my lungs, crying, trying to get away from everyone, hoping that all this was just a terrible nightmare. But one of the police officers had grabbed me when I was trying to escape the apartment. And there I realized this was real. I then had to accept it was not a nightmare, and I had screamed and cried myself to sleep. Story 11 by the user, Tgunner192. I was traveling with my sister, brother-in-law and 6-year-old nephew. We stopped at an interstate rest area. Myself and my nephew had to relieve ourselves, so we went to the men's room. My nephew finished before me. I told him to wait for me at the sinks. He didn't. For about 3 minutes I couldn't find my nephew at an interstate rest stop. Turns out, he had walked back to the car on his own. But for that 3 minutes, I had visions of him being abducted, and I was terrified, more horrified than I've ever been in my life. Story 12 by the user, average_LRKR. When I was a little kid, I used to cut through the woods and a field to get to my fiends' houses in the neighborhood. It was built into a wooded area, but they kept a lot of the trees and shit to give natural privacy, and it rocked. My friends know I cut through the woods, so started saying they saw Bigfoot and shit in the woods. Little kid me slightly thought Bigfoot might be real, but also knew there's no way he's in a neighborhood even if he was real, lol. Well, I go to head home for the night, and it's pitch black out. Can't even see my hand in front of my face. I go running back through the woods and the field, and all of a sudden hear rustling and something run, and then stop right in front of me, maybe 3 to 4 feet away. I froze and I damn near shit my pants. That was the first time I ever had an adrenaline rush. Obviously it was a deer, as we had a ton of those in our area, but little me thought back to the Bigfoot thing, and it being pitch black. Story 13 by the user, _Chorb_. My sister and I were up playing video games together around 10 to 11 p.m. one night a while ago, when we heard this terrifying slamming on our back screen door. We ran to our storage room, which was just right next to the computer room, grabbed golf clubs from the corner, and hid in there for what felt like a good 15-ish minutes. My sister kept telling me that the intruder was probably gone, and that it had been a while, but I was convinced our brains were just tricking us and making it seem like it had been a long time. Eventually we sat on the floor when we heard footsteps behind the door of the room we were hiding in, then a knock. We realized it was our mom, so we opened the door and both just started sobbing and asking her what happened. Turns out the terrifying slamming was my dad banging on the door trying to scare away a couple of stray cats that were keeping him up. It was 1:15 a.m. when my mom came and saved us. Story 14 by the user, Verksonik. I was living with my brother, my mom, and an uncle. One day I was playing with my friends online, and all of a sudden I hear my mother screaming for help and the uncle screaming something at her. Next thing I know, I'm hearing my brother, I think at the time he was 16 years old, and the uncle fight. There was police involved and shit. Apparently what happened was my mom and the uncle were arguing, and the uncle suddenly attacked her, choking her, so she called for help. Then my brother went into the room and they started fighting, in the process breaking a glass piece of a wardrobe door. I was helpless just a room away. Then after a while of fighting, my brother won, so the uncle sat down and started smoking and chugging down teas. My grandma got there, picked me up, and my brother stayed in case he needed to protect my mom. Police got there and found out he has been hiding a gun, which is highly illegal as it happened in Poland. I think he also had 2 bullets for it. He got a restraining order. He sat in jail for it, and then we moved TF out and he did as well. TLDR, my uncle attacked my mom. My brother protected her while I was helpless in the other room. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe our channel, and see you in the next video.